Thank you so much for joining me in this presentation on the Metaverse. My name is Pär, and I'll be your entertainment for the next 35 minutes. So the Metaverse is probably the newest and shiniest technology on the horizon. Facebook even changed their name to Meta to cement their investment and support of this new technology. Seems that investment is booming and every major tech company is jumping on the bandwagon. This is, however, not only a positive thing. You don't have to be a genius to see that the Metaverse is probably in a perfect storm or perfect hype. It's underpinned by speculations, wishful thinking, and a bit of fear of missing out. With that said, I have absolutely no doubt that it's going to be a game changer in the future. Not only a game changer, but even a shift in how we interact with the computer, a permanent shift. The question is when. When will the Metaverse be mainstream? If you ask the experts, they're going to say maybe 2023. I think that's not going to happen. In 5 years' time, probably not. Not as mainstream consumers embark on the Metaverse journey. In 10 years, maybe not. Within 20 years, absolutely. Today we're going to look at the Metaverse, see if it even exists, and if it does, what it's like working in the Metaverse. I have two things. I'm going to introduce you to how I see the Metaverse, and then we're going to see what it's like working in there. So with all the hype around Metaverse, I'll do my best to have both feet on the ground and give what I think is a realistic picture of the Metaverse, so you understand that. But first, a few words about me. I had my first encounter with virtual reality back in the 90s, when you had to go to an arcade hall. You paid about 10 Swedish kronor to play for a minute, maybe two. The experience was terrible in every sense. The graphics was like Tetris. The frame rate was running at about 15 frames per second, terrible motion sickness, and everything was just bad. And then the VR trend died out, and nothing happened for a long time. Then in 2012, Lucky Palmer announced the Oculus Rift. And it looked like this. And I was lucky enough to have my parental leave coincide with the first release of the Has it been like that since the beginning? Yeah. But it's when did it stop working? You saw the.
Not like 5 minutes before.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was it. Any questions? You missed this slide, okay? Questions? Is that okay? So this is the second version of the development kit for Oculus Rift, and it coincided with my parental leave. So first of parental leave, I had a kid in one hand and the headset in another hand, and I realized that I was gonna spend 9 months doing both. I did some gaming, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but I quickly realized that I had to go back to my roots, doing some kind of development. So I downloaded what became my favorite editor, Unity, that I've been tinkering with ever since, and I decided to have a realistic vision for what you can build in 9 months. So I decided to build a single room with maybe a window or door, good-looking textures on the wall, some lighting, and some basic furniture. That was it. You know, with the hobby project, you start it up and then you never succeed. Happened before? No? So that was a realistic vision. At some point, this entire project derailed completely, and I found myself, I remember thinking at one point that I'm addicted to this. I couldn't let my hands go off the computer and just developing things. So everything derailed, and I decided to do something very different. And I ended up taking my kids to our offices here in Malmö, taking pictures of the different colors in the office, borrowing the floor map of the office, and I built a true-to-scale model of our office in Malmö. Every single detail is in there, almost. There's missing a few chairs over there. It's not complete. It has a few glitches. I even added a few zombies and a dinosaur in there and turned it into a zombie game that we actually used in our booth here at Øredev a few years ago. Did anyone play it? If so, I'm sorry, because I didn't fix the motion sickness. It was terrible. So I remember playing it for maybe a few minutes, and then I couldn't eat for 4 hours. It was really bad. But otherwise, nice. So enough about me. What about the metaverse? The metaverse is a new concept. I think it's fair to say that it's a bit fluffy. No one seems to know what it is. There are as many interpretations and definitions as there are experts. Some people say that the metaverse is Minecraft or Roblox or Fortnite. Other experts paint vastly different pictures of something in the future where we have some kind of advanced headset living in a dystopian future. I tend to be somewhere in the middle. I think we should align on what it is. So I'm going to tell you a short story to give you my view of what the metaverse is. Every story has a hero. So I'm going to introduce you to ours. This is Ebbe, our hero. He is soon to be 8 years old. And he and his generation will surely experience the metaverse and interact with it for real. I might not be as lucky, but he will. So we're going to follow him for a day somewhere in the future, maybe 10 years from now, and see what that can be like. By the way, if you're wondering why he's all fired up, red cheeks and sweaty hair, I'll tell you in a second. So a day in Ebbe's life a few years from now. He's a teenager, he's going to wake up, and I realize it's not going to be sunshine as a teenager, but he's going to wake up, have breakfast, and then go to school. That's going to be pretty normal. He's sitting in his classroom. The first lecture is history. And they're reading, they're studying the Mesozoic era, that is when the dinosaur lived. But instead of listening to the teacher, watching a movie, or just being lectured, they're going to put on some kind of headset. Not necessarily the VR headsets we have today, something different, but you get the point. And they're going to experience, they're going to be transported into that time era, and they're going to be standing next to the dinosaur and see exactly what it is to live, breathe, eat with his class. And the teacher's going to be next to him using maybe voice to explain some of the details. It's going to be highly immersive. The dinosaurs are going to look almost perfect, not the graphics we have today. I'm not sure if this is going to happen, but what if we can make an experience that is so good that when you've experienced it, there is no need for an exam? Because you know that living through the experience is enough to pick up all the vital details. That would be a dream. Maybe we can fix like the education. We don't have to have tests. It's going to be that engaging. Maybe. It's a bit of a dream. I never enjoy tests. Then school is over. He's probably going to have maybe 2 or 3 hours of education in the metaverse. The rest, like sports, math, doesn't make sense to do in there. Instead, he's going to do them in the physical world. Then he goes home. He has a few things on his agenda. The first one is a meeting with his grandparents who live some distance away. They meet maybe twice a year physically. So instead of putting on a metaverse headset again, I'm not sure what it looks like, but kind of VR. And he goes to their meeting. He's not seeing an avatar like we think of avatars today. Like it's not green pants, yellow shirt, and a mohawk. He sees his grandparents like they actually look like, an authentic version of their physical persons. You can see the face expressions. There is room for making jokes, being sarcastic. And you can even see micro expressions. That's how good the experience have to be. I've done my best to hang around with the avatars we have today, but I think it's really hard. I want to see who the person is. I want to recognize them. If this works, it will also mean that we don't have to travel the world for meetings. I don't have to travel to New York to sign a paper or have a conference or just participate in a workshop or a meeting. This is a viable option for a lot of the business cases we have today that is just unnecessary carbon emission. Okay, so the meeting is done, and then obviously he's going to play some Minecraft. It's probably still around. So again, he keeps the headsets on, and he joins Minecraft with his friends. This is already happening. There's not a lot of people, but people are actually gaming in virtual reality today. More and more are transitioning. What's noteworthy about this is that in 10 or 15 years, when we look back at 2020, we're going to say, how could we ever sit with a keyboard, a screen, and mouse and play games? That's stupid. Because the experience is going to be so much better, so much different. No one's going to use a screen to play games. It doesn't make sense. Maybe that's 20 years from now. We'll see. And then a good night story. I don't know if he appreciates that I'm saying a good night story when he's 15, but some kind of good night. Maybe not with his parents, but just quick story, slow-paced, and then good night. So it's a very different way of interacting with the world. Some kind of definition. I just want to keep it simple. There are definitions on Wikipedia. I've read them 10 times. I still don't understand what it says. I think of it as just a parallel digital universe, three-dimensional, like the virtual reality we have today, that we can choose to enter whenever we see fit. It's not about a dystopian view or anything. It's just we can choose to be there for a reason. There has to be a good reason to be there. Better education, better immersion in games, something. So the books you've been reading about the dystopian world where we ruin the world, we're being in the metaverse because the real world it sucks. I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be a business value in the metaverse, like education, or just being social. And it's also a paradigm shift. I don't think we're going to use computers the way we do today. No screens, no mouse, no keyboard. There's got to be a better way to do it. So maybe in 20 years when we look back, this is going to look stupid. I'm going to look stupid. But the computer's going to look stupid. That's just the simplest way I can think of it. And it raises the question, is the metaverse the same as virtual reality? When you read articles today and you listen to experts, they usually say VR, AR, XR interchangeably with the metaverse. And for a good reason, but I don't think it's the same. So virtual reality is the only thing we have today to get into the metaverse. That's why we think of virtual reality as metaverse. But if we look forward, so on the x-axis you have time, on the y-axis you have uncertainty. What we know today is that we have virtual reality that we can use to enter the metaverse. But is that true tomorrow? Maybe not. Maybe there's a better way. So another version of Google Glass, maybe. That's going to happen in a few years. High uncertainty, but still it's a viable option. We don't want to have the headset on our heads. It's not a good, it's not comfortable. Then maybe contact lenses or some kind of lenses that we can just put in our eyes and it will have the same function as the VR headsets we're having today. Maybe. Maybe this is 20 years, 30 years from today. And then something else is going to happen. And then finally, someone like Elon Musk is going to figure out how we can just hijack the optical nerve and just connect the computer straight in our brain. It's a bit of a joke, but they're working on it, so it's not a joke. They actually succeeded in feeding like low-res images to blind people using optical nerve. So it's not that far-fetched. So that's why we say that metaverse is like virtual reality, because it's the only platform we have getting in there, but it's going to change in the future. Is Roblox and Fortnite metaverses? I mean, we don't have a definition of the metaverse. I don't know. But I think the metaverse is something very, very different. A three-dimensional world that we can live in, but it's not the physical world that Roblox. Roblox and Fortnite is usually just played on a computer screen. So I would say no, but experts, they can agree here. Why was Øredev all fired up? Because he's been playing virtual reality, obviously. I can say that the next generation have absolutely no problem spending time with a headset on their head. He would probably staying there until the end of days if I hadn't physically removed him from the room. He's playing Fruit Ninja, slicing fruit. And he can do that hour after hour. It's really good. That brings us to the question, what's it like working in the metaverse, if it really exists? But let's say that it exists. We can experience the metaverse through virtual reality. And what's it like? This is my office. Well, it's actually not my office, it's my chair. It's the chair I'm sitting at my office. It's smack in the middle of the office. When I sit there, I usually do three things. I read emails. So I read email, I read articles, I consume text. That's what I do. I respond to emails and I write on Slack. That's writing text. And I participate in meetings. Every now and then I'm also participating in a workshop, but that's not something I do on a regular basis. So read, write, and participate in meetings. That's what I do. Sounds pretty boring actually, but that's another thing. So that's what I need to do in the metaverse or virtual reality for this to work for me. So the question is if it does. I've chosen not to sit in the middle of the office with a VR headset on, because that's really awkward. Instead, I move across the room maybe 50 meters into our VR lab. It's a lab with all the different headsets. I've chosen the Valve Index as my companion. And the room is pretty isolated. It has a single solid door and a window to the outside. That's how it's connected to the office. And the first thing you have to understand is that when you put on a headset and you spend hours in there, it's a bit awkward the first hour. So what I do is every 5th minute, I raise my head and I take a sneak peek through the gap between my nose and the headset and see if there's someone out there. After an hour, you start thinking, never mind. And to be honest, most of the time there's no one there. And then sometimes there is. What I've learned from experience is that most of the time people are really friendly and they're just curious to see what you're doing. Like standing in virtual reality for 3 hours like this, then people want to know, like, what are you doing? I'm just painting. But you get used to it, and at some point you just forget about it. So with that in mind, we have the headset strapped on, the computer is running, I have a tethered headset. It's time to start working. And that's when we encounter our first hiccup or problem. In the future, I guess I can just have virtual reality running, and I can just start whatever program I need to work with. Excel, mail, Slack, whatever. Unfortunately, in virtual reality or the metaverse, there are no tools to do that. I mean, we've been betting a lot on gaming. You can find every possible game in there, but almost no productivity tools. It's really lacking. So with that in mind, we have to settle with kind of a makeshift solution, and that is just a virtual desktop in the metaverse, in virtual reality. So it's just a two-dimensional screen replicating what's on my desktop. And it looks like this. And this is often the case, which is a bit of a disappointment. I don't know if you can see we're running Windows. And I don't know if you can see this. It's Chrome, so I'm just browsing Chrome on a slightly arched two-dimensional window. And that's maybe 70% of the time, the option I have. I don't know if it makes sense to have an email program that's virtual reality compatible with different like drawers and desks in 3D. Maybe, maybe not. I would prefer to have some of the tools as native application using the 3D environment, which I don't. So I'm basically in the metaverse with endless possibilities, looking at the two-dimensional screen, no improvement. And sometimes there is an application I can use, which is really nice. So this is usually the case. The good thing here, if we're going to point out one thing that's really good, is that most of the work in virtual reality or metaverse is still waiting to be done by someone. So there's plenty of opportunities for startup companies and people just tinkering, building new stuff. So if you're interested in embarking on a startup journey, maybe this is your chance. There is so much that needs to be built. There are no good email clients. I don't know if you remember back in 2000 when the first smartphone came out. We built this fart application, stuff like that. None of that is built in virtual reality or the metaverse. Still an option to do that. Okay, so with that said, we're going to move into the first thing we need to do, and that's consuming text. And to be honest, this is one of the things I dreaded the most when I started working in virtual reality. I had a picture of low quality, low contrast, jittery text that would just make me have a headache within minutes. But the headsets today are really good, and I was surprised to see that that's not the case at all. It's really hard taking realistic, authentic screenshots in virtual reality. You will just get a screenshot. It's a bit different with the optics, but and it's really bad. Okay, what you're looking at is really crisp text. Just convince yourself. It looks terrible, but it's really crisp. You can read as if, not like a Kindle, but it's really easy to look at the text. Reading text is a no-brainer. It works really well in virtual reality. There are two things that can come in your way. The first thing is if you haven't strapped on the headset correctly, or maybe it's too loose, then it will inevitably slide down your nose a few millimeters, and that's enough to break the reading experience, making it really blurry. The other really annoying thing, if you're sharing headsets, is that people, for some reason, can't keep the hands of the inside, the lenses. And then you get these marks, and that's terrible. That's ruining everything. And you have to clean the lenses. But if you can just avoid those two things, and you have the distance between the eyes and the distance between the eyes and the screen correctly configured, it works really well, at least for me. So that's it. Now you might wonder, can you read a full page of text? Yes, easily. Can you read 4 pages of text? Yes, easily. Can you read 20 pages of text? You can. And it's actually quite nice in there. There are no distractions. You're focusing on one thing, just reading. And I have a bit of a jumpy brain. I get very distracted when there are things around me. So being in the metaverse reading is a good experience for me compared to just being outside. I can never read more than a sentence and then I get distracted. Good option. Reading, yes. Can you read, what about Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment? Endless pages. I have no idea. I'm not going to try. And I think if you want to use virtual reality or the metaverse, it's better if you watch the movie in virtual reality. It can be pretty cool. Like reading more than 20 pages does make sense. Like it's not why you're there. Use a Kindle, buy the book. Then a slightly more complex thing is writing text. How do you respond to an email? How do you write just a single sentence? And it turns out to be much harder than you think. So I started trying to type on the physical keyboard. And I consider myself to be a pretty good typer without looking at the keyboard, which apparently I'm not. Because if you're a good typer, you still look down and align your hands every 20 seconds. And with a big plastic box in front of your eyes, that's really hard. So I found myself making mistakes, maybe 5 mistakes every sentence. So it was impossible to use the physical keyboards. There are keyboards that can be virtually mimicked. It's not working with the index, but I know that Facebook they have a, I don't know if it's a collaboration with Logitech. So they have a keyboard called R830 that has a virtual representation true to scale that you can use. It's not working with the index. So using the physical keyboard is really hard. The next option would be to use some kind of virtual keyboard. This is terrible. It's really hard to, writing a sentence in this is almost impossible. However, I was quite surprised by the accuracy of the hand controller. So writing a single sentence accurately works really well. More than a sentence or two, it just annoys me. But it's quite quick. So if you just need to type a Slack message or input an address, it works really well. That leaves us with one option, and that's voice. I think the voice is going to be the future in virtual reality, not the keyboard. It's not fully integrated in virtual reality at all yet, but it works pretty well for just navigating around, entering some basic sentences. You could, if you do this for a few weeks, then you can actually enter maybe 10 sentences correctly, or not. But it works pretty well for just going around and navigating in the metaverse. So I would say that the metaverse is not ready for authors and publishers yet. we're not there. So reading text works, writing text and interacting with the rest of the world is not a good experience at all. So I've been in the metaverse for maybe 2 or 3 hours by now, and I feel pretty fine. No headache. The only thing that's bothering me is this. I don't know if you can smell it. The lukewarm plastic that's this close to your nose. That's a terrible experience, and it makes me a bit queasy. I also feel a bit isolated, but that's how we are as humans. Like, we want to be around people, and being trapped in a headset with plastic, it's just a bad experience, and it's a lingering experience in the back of my head. But it's not a big problem. So I'm just going to keep going here for a few more hours. I should say that obviously it's just me. I'm not in any way statistically proven to be correct here. There are studies with maybe 20 or 40 people attending, and it's shown that out of 40 people, usually 2 or 3 people quit within a few hours. So this is not for everyone. Meetings, that's one of the most important things here. Meetings or even workshops. How does that work? If we start with just having large gatherings of people, say workshops, then there are tools and platforms for doing this. I think this is Altspace. There are many, many different ways of doing this. For me, so you can organize concerts, you can host workshops, you can have enormous amount of whiteboard to just play around with. For me, this is a no-go for a single reason, and that is I don't have any friends. I mean, not like that. I have friends, but I don't have a single person in my network or at my work that uses virtual reality. So I can host a workshop, but no one's going to attend. So it's a no-go for me. With that said, there are absolutely tools to do this, but it doesn't work for me. So that leaves the question, can I have meetings in virtual reality? And of course I can. So this is again the virtual desktop in the metaverse, and I've just opened my calendar, clicked on a meeting, and I've just joined one of my colleagues, Jonas, on his way 2 days ago, on his way from Øredev. And we're chit-chatting about a few things. It works really well. The audio is a bit lower and a bit less precise than I'm used to, but it works really well. I can have meetings in VR, short ones at least, maybe half an hour, an hour. The question is, or the problem is, what do you think he's seeing? Because I'm in a plastic box. He's not seeing me. So he's seeing exactly where my eyes are. There are 2 cameras. So he's looking at what I would have been looking at, which is a real awkward situation. And it could be that I'm careless. Maybe I'm looking at some very secret documents or something else. Or maybe I'm just, my brain is jumping around and it's really uncomfortable for him because I'm going to be like this. And then he's going to be on his phone getting motion sickness. So this is far from optimal, but it works. Maybe I can turn this off, or he will just have to go with the sound or something. But it works. I can read text, I can write text, and I can also hold my meetings, be part of the meetings, as long as they don't disconnect me because of this. So the conclusion is that working in virtual reality works really well if you're okay with sacrificing some of your comforts and you understand the limitations, what you can do. This is not a medium for hosting huge gatherings of people in a workshop room yet. You can consume text, large amounts of text. Writing is really hard. But I've come to the conclusion that today working in the metaverse is not about being more productive. It's much more about being productive in certain areas, like reading text. So if you want to concentrate and find your focus when reading, virtual reality is really good. So I think I prefer the virtual world when reading text or just focusing on something very specific instead of being in the physical world, because it's really messy out there and it's noisy and people seem to want to talk to me. And I don't mind. I don't mind people talking to me, but when you want to do something very specific for maybe half an hour, this is perfect. So I would encourage you to try it out, maybe for an hour, 2 hours, and see what it's like. But just aim for the right thing. Don't think you can compose emails right away. Start reading something, see what it's like. Maybe just enjoy some experiences. Maybe watch a movie in there, play a game, see what it's like. It's actually much better than I expected. I'm going to keep working in the metaverse as much as I can. We're just in the beginning. We're just using VR. We're just in the beginning, and in a year, maybe 2 years, 5 years from now, this is going to be very, very different and much, much better. So I look forward to that. I also look forward to having conferences, having workshops, and whatnot in the metaverse. We'll have to see. The future. We're not going to talk about the future. I'm going to say thank you so much for listening instead. I mean, it's lunchtime. You don't have to stay if you don't want to, but please, more questions.